This video is all about having PCOS and the fertility issues that I experienced when trying to get pregnant, and basically my journey to having 3 children. Now, I need to start this video by obviously stating the obvious and saying that PCOS is different for different people. It's not always the same. Cycles can be very different. Mine are actually really short and I have high testosterone, but I know for some people you can have no cycles at all or really long cycles. So this isn't like a how to get pregnant or how to conceive when you have PCOS. This is just my experience of what happened to me and how it works. If you are interested in finding ways that can help with PCOS, I have a whole separate video on that topic where I discuss things that I've brought into my life and supplements that I've taken that have really helped for PCOS, so I will link that below if you want to go and watch that. So let's get into my story. It's a little bit of a complex one actually. It's hard to kind of know where to start because actually the first inkling I had that I had fertility issues was when I tried to conceive my second child. My first child was actually an accident. He was conceived unexpectedly and I only realised or started to suspect that I had PCOS after this point. It was when I was trying to conceive my subsequent children. Only been really quite recently, since I was pregnant with my 3rd baby, that I started to suspect that what I had was PCOS. Before that I just knew I had fertility issues, but I didn't know what was causing it. And yeah, my story is a little bit unusual. It's not like I found out I had PCOS from a young age and was told I might have trouble conceiving. It kind of happened the other way around. I had an unexpected pregnancy, and then when it came time to have more children, I suddenly found that I wasn't able to stay pregnant. I have literally no idea how we conceived our first baby. Now that I have been diagnosed with PCOS and I know that my cycles are so wonky, it seems sort of even more kind of weirdly miraculous to me that he even came about. I think it just must have been one of those months where all the minuscule tiny chances just lined up. The condom didn't work, my cycle must have been unexpectedly around 28 days rather than really short like it usually is, and all those things just lined up. As I said, this is a bit of an odd story and I can't really talk about how I got pregnant with my first baby, but I did want to just mention that because it's kind of all part of everything that has happened. So where my PCOS infertility issues really started was when we were trying to conceive again. So we'd had our first baby and he was 1.5, I think, and we decided we were ready to have another baby. So we just started trying. This is the first time we've actually ever tried to conceive a baby because obviously our first was an accident, and got pregnant straight away and worked out that we were going to have like a due date pretty much bang on the 25th of December, which is great planning. Got quite excited about it, only to lose that baby just a couple of weeks later, probably around 6.5 weeks. I was really gutted about that. It hit me quite hard, the kind of emotional side effects of your hormones and losing a baby. It can be really unexpectedly quite sad, even though you know it happens to a lot of women and you kind of half expect it might happen to you just because the odds are so high. That was a really sad time. So I started after this tracking my cycles, which is something I'd never done before. I'd never done like any sort of conception stuff like ovulation tests or temping or tracking my cycles. So after this miscarriage I just wanted to make sure that I was doing all I could to conceive. So I started doing that and I noticed that my cycles were quite on the short side. I was ovulating around day 14, 15, but only having like a 7 or 8 day luteal phase, which is the second half of the cycle after you've ovulated. So this meant that I was having a period every 3 weeks. It was round about every 21 to 22 days, my cycle, and it also meant that my cycle was way too short to successfully progress a pregnancy. Your luteal phase needs to be at least sort of 10 to 11 days in order to get enough progesterone in your body to help that egg implant properly and continue to grow. So I knew I had an issue with my cycles, but I kind of put it down to having the miscarriage and thought it'll probably even out in a couple of months. I got pregnant again, and again had a loss at around sort of the same time, about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. That loss hit me even harder than the first one. I knew at this point that I had a problem and that the miscarriages weren't just kind of bad luck or meant to happen. It was my body and my cycles that were not quite right, and I had no idea what to do to make them better. So that was like a really tough time. It was really emotional and I felt really helpless, and also because I hadn't been diagnosed with PCOS and I didn't even have any idea that it was PCOS at this stage, I had no guidance on what to do to help my cycles. When your luteal phase is less than 10 days, it's called a luteal phase defect. So I knew I had that, so I started Googling things that I could do to help lengthen my luteal phase. So those things that I found were taking vitamin C, taking vitamin B6, and also taking a herbal supplement called Agnus castus, which is meant to help regulate your cycles if your cycles are irregular. Before I started taking all of those things, I had my third miscarriage very early on this time. I think it was basically a chemical pregnancy. I'd tested quite early, which I always tell myself not to do and always do anyway. So that was miscarriage number 3. By this point I was kind of just expecting it. Then I started taking all the supplements that I had heard could help, and those worked really well because the next month I was pregnant and this one stuck. I didn't lose this one, and it resulted in my second child, Rory. So I don't know how long my cycle was that month, but I do just know that it was long enough to progress a healthy pregnancy. Now, I can't quite remember exactly when I started to get the classic PCOS symptoms. If I wasn't experiencing it before my second baby, I certainly noticed it after he was born. I struggled really badly with horrendous acne all the way through the month. It just didn't let up. I had horrible scarring, my skin was just disgusting, and I never had acne as a teenager, so this was a new thing to me and it was just horrible to deal with. I hated it. I put on probably around 2 stone in weight, and a lot of that was concentrated around my middle in the classic PCOS apple shape, and I also had real issues with what I thought was postpartum hair loss, but actually went on far longer than postpartum hair loss. I was still losing loads of hair definitely when Arlo was still 18 months, I was losing loads of hair, and when Rory was around the same age, I was losing it. It just didn't stop at all. The only time it stopped was when I was pregnant again and I got the good hormones that stopped your hair falling out. So I had a really thin kind of parting area up here. It was like really flat and kind of looked really crap, especially because my hair's quite thick, so the rest of it was like really full, and then there's like really flat kind of parting up here, and I just looked like I had a triangle head, which was really nice. And then the other telling symptom was that my cycles were still really short even after I finished breastfeeding, because I did think it might have been to do with breastfeeding, but I completely finished that and I still had 21-day cycles with a really short luteal phase. I still didn't put together that it was PCOS at this stage. It was only when I read, and this was I think just at the point that I'd conceived Otto, my third baby, I read that actually PCOS can be linked to really short cycles, and I'd thought it was linked to not having cycles or having really long cycles. So it was only when I read that by chance that I thought, well, that's what I've got then, because all my symptoms add up to this. So when it came time to think about conceiving our third child, I knew if I was lucky enough to be able to conceive, I wanted to have more than 2 children, definitely. So I always knew that a third was on the cards if we could make it happen. So that meant that pretty much as soon as my periods returned after my second baby, I was really conscious of tracking my cycles, working out each month how long they were, trying to find things that would help change them, trying to work out the links and what might actually be the key to helping my cycles lengthen. I implemented like a 6-month plan to get my body ready to conceive, because I knew if we just tried blindly just whenever we felt like it was going to end in more miscarriages, and I really didn't want to go through that again. It was horrible that time, one of the worst times of my life, having all those miscarriages and feeling so helpless about my infertility and not knowing what was going on. So this time, if I could avoid it, I wanted to just wait until I knew that my cycles could handle a pregnancy and then go for it. So we waited a good, I think it was 8 months in the end, until I thought, okay, I think we've got a good shot at this now. And that was again taking the supplements, the B6, the Agnus Castus and the vitamin C, which helped lengthen my cycle to I think about 26 days all in all, with like a 10 or 11 day luteal phase. And we conceived Otto first month trying, and his was luckily a pregnancy that progressed and resulted in Otto. So at this stage I felt like I had a handle on my fertility and I knew things that could help it, but I still didn't have any sort of PCOS diagnosis, although at this stage I was well on the way to realising that that's what I had. I made a promise to myself that once I'd had Otto and I was out of the kind of hormonal phase of the first year and I'd finished breastfeeding, I would go and get my symptoms investigated and I would chase up an official diagnosis for PCOS. So I had all the things checked, like my testosterone and all the like, was it FH, FSH, or all of that cycle stuff that they test, and my testosterone, as I expected, came back sky high, and I was diagnosed with PCOS because you need 2 out of 3 symptoms, I think. So it's high testosterone, wonky irregular cycles, and acne and hair loss, and I had all of those, so I was officially diagnosed with it. So ironically enough, after I'd finished all of my kind of conception years, I finally got diagnosed with PCOS, and now I have access to like the official drugs that you can take to help you conceive, like Clomid and metformin. I'm actually on metformin now because I find it helps me with so many things. I talk about that in my other video about things that I found to help treat my PCOS. Otto, my last baby, is now 2.5, so I've had a fair few years of keeping an eye on my cycles, charting them, and unfortunately they are still naturally very short. My gut feeling is that I won't have a normal cycle without help from medication or supplements in my life. As I've already said, and I've said on Instagram as well, I do want another baby, but Sam is firmly against it at the moment, and because for us we can't just snap our fingers and decide on a whim and get pregnant, it's a much more longer process than that. I'm kind of just treating life at the moment as if maybe we will try at some point, so I'm kind of preparing my body just in case, so that we don't have to wait another 6 or 8 months to conceive. So my game plan at the moment is a little bit different to what I did with the boys, and that is that I'm actually on the pill, which obviously isn't great for conception, but it evens out my wonky hormones and my cycles more than anything else that I've tried. And I'm also on metformin, which has been great for me too. If I were to try and get pregnant now, I would just come off the pill, and I have experimented to see how my cycles are when this happens, and I have as close to a normal length cycle and luteal phase as possible in the first couple of cycles off the pill and in conjunction with taking my metformin. Any longer than that and it all starts to get a bit short again as those synthetic hormones leave my body. So my game plan, if I was going to conceive now, would be to go on the pill and then go off the pill, and try and conceive in the window of the first few months before my hormones start depleting again. So I guess that's another kind of tactic you can try if you have naturally irregular cycles but the pill evens it out for you. As I said at the beginning of the video, it's going to be different for everyone. I can only tell you what worked for me and my own personal story. If you have similar cycles to mine, if you have high testosterone and short cycles with a short luteal phase, then this stuff will probably be quite useful for you. But if you've got really long irregular cycles or you're not ovulating, then maybe this will be completely useless to you. I would recommend watching my other video though, which has general tips that can really help anyone with PCOS. If you are currently struggling with PCOS and infertility, my heart really does go out to you. I will never forget just how helpless I felt when I was trying to conceive and it just wasn't happening, and I had no idea why or what I could do to help things. It's a horrible place to be in emotionally, and there are no answers, and I wish I could give you answers. I know that doctors used to tell people with PCOS that they might not be able to conceive, and through my own experiences and experiences of other friends that I have, I know that it does make things challenging to conceive, and you do start with a bit of a handicap to your fertility compared to people with bog standard regular cycles, but I don't think it's impossible to conceive, and it's important to try and stay as positive as you can do. If you're struggling with PCOS and infertility, go and get referred to an endocrinologist that specialises in PCOS. That can be really helpful. And if you don't know if you have PCOS, you haven't been diagnosed, but you suspect you do, I would just probably go with the mindset that you probably have it. You know your body better than anyone else, you know your symptoms, and it can't hurt to kind of treat it as if you do have PCOS. This is such a big topic, I'm not sure if I've kind of covered everything. There's probably parts that I've forgotten. If you've got any questions about any specific part of my journey to conceiving my 3 children, do drop me a comment and I will answer that for you. Thank you so much for watching.